We're ready to roll. Let's go. Man, thanks for doing this today. We're already rolling, so that's how we do on the podcast. We get started straight out of the gate. Thomas and I were talking about you, and Thomas Seelbeiner, who's kind of the producer in the background that likes to be heard and not seen. He's floating around here somewhere. We were talking about kind of your background and excited to get you on the call. You're a bit of a newcomer to the mortgage industry.
Yes, I am not a mortgage guy at all. I've only been around mortgages for about 4 years now. I actually come more from digital transformation, digital strategies, and conversion rate optimization spaces. And I made my name, or made a name for myself, really by what's become known as data-driven marketing or behavioral insight marketing. But when I was younger, this young college kid going to these big corporations, asking them to give me a lot of money to do marketing campaigns for them, I had to really focus a lot on data and really understanding how consumer behavior online was impacting that revenue for companies. So I'm not a mortgage guy by any means.
Well, and talk about that for a second for people that don't understand digital marketing strategy, because that touches a lot of things. I mean, you're talking about behavior, you're talking about AI. I'm curious to talk about that for a minute. And then I kind of want to go back, because I know you got recognized pretty quick. I mean, as a relatively young guy, it'd be fun to know sort of who you were when you were 15 years old, like how that all came together. But talk a little bit about the digital marketing landscape and kind of what that means to somebody that maybe doesn't know.
Yeah. So, digital marketing is really anything you do online or from your cell phone. So, social media, if you've ever been to a website and you're wondering why, if you go to a website and you're wondering why you're now seeing their ads on Instagram or Facebook, I'm that guy that's setting that type of stuff.
So you're the one that when I say I could use a new pair of new boots, the next time I go on my social media, are you, Bryan, you're the one listening?
Well, not necessarily for that, but I am one of the ones that is listening and trying to, and the people that do it the best are the ones that are understanding kind of, the right product, right time type thing,
Right.
And a lot of that, you have cookies, or what's known as cookies. So whenever you're going onto a website and they're asking you, do you want to opt into the cookies for this website? You're basically giving people like myself the right to understand how you're interacting with that website, so that I can give you a more personalized experience in terms of your marketing and the engagement of that platform itself.
How has that evolved? I mean, where that was when you were, and I don't know how old you are, and I don't expect to ask, although you're happy to tell us, that's probably changed a lot since you were 25, and sort of how you're utilizing not only that tools, but the resources today, and how that creates value for those that you support.
Yeah. I'm not ashamed to say I'm 35, and even though I don't have mortgage experience, my co-founders do. We have one guy that has over 25 years of experience, and another guy that has, my co-founder, Stephen Better, has over 12 years of mortgage underwriting experience. So I don't want to misrepresent that we don't have any experience. We're just trying to disrupt.
I know. Yep.
But I am 35. I actually started doing stuff online when I was like 17, so I guess in digital terms, I am an old head, an OG, as they would call me,
right.
But even with Home Lending Pal, it is, people talk about our impact on minorities, and it is because I am African American and my co-founder is Latino. But really, it's more so the millennials and the way the Generation Z are interacting with everything. Their buying behavior is completely different from baby boomers. This is a segment that is very tech savvy, but probably less financial savvy than baby boomers in terms of how they look at debt products. But everything is done from their cell phone. If you have kids, I don't have kids, but if you have kids, they're probably more likely to text you than they are to call you. And they might even text you when they're sitting right next to you saying, hey, can you grab the glass for me? So digital has definitely changed a lot. And to be good at digital, it has to be more than just, saying, oh, I have the latest technology, I have the latest tech stack. You really have to think of, when it comes to your tech stack, how not only are you internally merging everything together so that it's communicating, so that you're understanding and creating that personalized experience, but then also how are you relating that personalized experience to how you are interacting from your marketing standpoint with your main target demographic, which could be first-time home buyers. It could be LMI borrowers. It could be purchase, refi. It just really depends on kind of what you're looking at. But you really have to look at data to truly understand how they're interacting and how to increase those conversions. And like you said, I'm new to the mortgage space, but I'm not new to understanding data. Data doesn't lie. Men lie, women lie, but data doesn't. So that's kind of where I started my career and just kept building upon that.
I want to get into Home Lending Pal, of course. And that's how you and I got introduced. We were both at an event at the same time, and total transparency, I kind of just grabbed you as you were getting ready to get into an Uber. And I said, hey man, we need to know each other. And we had some mutual acquaintances, and luckily you didn't see me as a stalker or whatever, and said, yeah, let's start communicating. Going back, here you are 35 and have done, recognized by Ernst & Young at 25 years old or under 25 years old. You've supported some really big players with digital marketing strategies, whether it's I was reading, Zillow and Microsoft, and I think you worked on Barack Obama's campaign at some level, which I'd love to hear a little bit about that. You said, though, you started kind of messing around with this when you were 17. How does that happen? What were you like as a kid? Were you sitting in front of the computer all day long? Were you playing sports? Were you going outside and playing with your friends? Let us into the brain of Bryan when he was a young teenager.
Oh man, I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Yeah, let's go. This is the good content.
This is good stuff. No, so I am a serial entrepreneur, but I'm also a former athlete. So I did used to play sports. I was on my high school basketball team. I thought I was going to play in college, and I didn't. But I really started my first company in Okinawa, Japan, when I was 12 years old. And that was a lawn care company. Thanks to
wait. Hold on. Were you in Okinawa?
We were in Okinawa. My parents, I'm a military brat, so my
mom, right on. Okay.
My dad was in the army. So I was in Okinawa, Japan, and they had a work for hire program in which kids under 16 could basically get a job for the summer. And I was fortunate that people knew my mom. So originally I started working at the local gym, and after that kind of ended, I decided that I wanted to try to cut grass. My parents were kind of typical military parents. They were kind of strict. You had to earn your weight. So and I couldn't just sit around the house. So when I wasn't training for sports, my job was to actually go out and work. So I got a lawnmower, and a lot of the houses that are built on a military campus are kind of like a college campus. It's kind of a cookie cutter template. And I basically understood that they put people in the houses based on their rank within the military, and their rank determines their pay. So that could determine what I should charge for pricing. And then I used some of my friends to help me cut grass, and I went and told the government that, hey, you should give us a contract and let the kids cut the grass during the summer and make money from it. And
wait. Did you get a government contract when you were 12 years old?
I did, man. I went through my mom and got it. And then my mom, my dad's colonel at the time, ended up buying it. He married a Japanese woman and ended up buying it from me when we got relocated to Washington, D.C. But yeah, man, I proposed at 12 years old a contract, and the government said, this is actually a good idea to keep kids off the street and make them productive. So, and they turned it into a work for hire program. So. And
then your pops eventually acquired that business from you? The contract?
So his boss eventually required. So, he had a colonel that was close to the retirement age or close to retirement. He found the nice Japanese woman that he wanted to marry. He wanted to stay in Okinawa. And, why not stay in Okinawa and acquire this very profitable business using kids? That sounds really bad that I'm saying it now, but utilizing youth labor. But again, it was really intended to be a program that was intended to help, teach principles and work ethic to kids. And I just happened to be the one that, built it out, but it was very, very profitable at the time for us. So
that's an awesome story. How often do you tell that story? It almost feels like you don't tell that story that often.
I don't, honestly, man, I have, so even now, it's hard. I'm usually the only minority in the room, and I'm usually the youngest one in the room in many cases. So I have had to, over the years, get more confidence in myself, being willing to talk about some of the things that I've done. So this is probably the first time I've ever actually publicly went that deep into that story and kind of what happened there. But I don't really talk about myself as much as I should, or as much as people tell me I should. I kind of like trying to stay below the radar when I can as much as possible.
Well, look, I mean, Yeah, maybe it doesn't come natural for you, but what we love about having conversations like this, and really the reason that this quote podcast started, was that there were some leaders in the industry that I'd gotten to know well over the years. And these are the kind of conversations we have when we discuss supporting their strategic growth as an organization. And there were a few that said, you ought to record some of these conversations, because the reality is, I end up, this person ends up telling me things that on the surface seems like it might not be that important, but in the big scheme of things, it is. I mean, tech, certainly you made a great comment, and that was men and women, are emotional. So it's easy for them to gray the truth, even if they think they're telling the truth. Data doesn't lie, though. But at the end of the day, people really they're influenced by other people, and they want to work with other people, or they leave other people. So those stories end up being interesting. Plus, it puts you in the mind of the person that actually helped build a particular platform. Yeah. When did you move to DC? How old were you when you made that?
I was probably, let's see, 10th grade. Yeah, so 10th grade. So I think maybe 13, 14. My 10th grade year of high school, I moved to DC. I was there for about a year, but my grandmother got really sick in North Carolina. So, I was playing for the high school basketball team, and pretty much every weekend I was in North Carolina with my grandmother.
Okay.
The only reason I was even able to pass to the 10th grade or to the 11th grade was because I had like a 3.9 GPA, but I missed way too many days of school when the basketball season wasn't going. But in that time, my mother met a guy that was running an ice cream shop in DC, and I wanted to kind of help him out and grow his business. So I went through this whole kind of business plan thing that I was going to do. And one of the things was a jingle. Basically, when you came into the store, it kind of went back to the 50s and 60s, where they used to sing to you and interact with you that way. And I don't know if people remember, but Cold Stone used to actually do that when they kind of came into the forefront on their side. That's actually,
I didn't remember that. I didn't know that.
Cold Stone used to do that when they, back in like 2000, I would say 2002, 2003. Whenever you would walk in, they would like do a little jingle, and the people would kind of sing to you, relatively speaking. So I was like, oh, well, there's no way we can beat those guys. And so I ended up moving back to NC, and I couldn't get hired at a local clothing store. I guess I wasn't cute enough, or wasn't cute enough either. And I ended up starting a trucking company, but it was kind of weird because, I had the money that I sold the company, the truck, or the lawn care company. My mom was still in DC. I was staying in North Carolina with my aunt. And my mom comes down one weekend. I was like, hey, and this is around the time LeBron James' mom had bought him a Hummer. So I kept telling
I remember that.
Buy a Hummer. And so, we go up an hour to Dunn, North Carolina, and my uncle is with me because, he's thinking that we're going to buy a car. And we get out and walk onto a trucking lot, for 18-wheelers, to Peterbilt's to be exact. And the car dealer, and I haven't talked to the car dealer for probably a truck dealer for 2 or 3 weeks at this point. And so when I get out the car, he immediately goes to my uncle and says, hey, Bryan, nice to meet you. My uncle looks at him like, I'm not Bryan. Bryan's over there. And I'm only 16 at this time. And so my mama, she was pissed. She was highly upset. But after we went in, I was able to, so we went home. Of course, I got yelled at, but I presented her a very nice business plan about how we could, build a trucking company. And 2 years later, we had, over 22 trucks, over 32 full-time hires. And, we were doing nationwide contracts for both the brokerage side and the regular trucking side. So we had 48 to 53 foot reefer units that we were running.
So, okay, that is so much. I'm trying to unpack what you just said. So the person that owned that trucking company, you had been communicating with them for a while before your mom, or you said it was your uncle?
Yeah, my mom, my uncle. So I had a broker that I had been talking to about, putting loads on the truck.
Wait. Okay, hold on. What even triggered it though? What helped? What made you identify that you should communicate with this person about this business that, by the way, I'm assuming at the time you didn't even know how to drive a truck?
I did. I still don't. My uncle was a truck driver, and my mom was getting ready to retire, and she said that she wanted to build a trucking company. So I went and did it for her, basically, or tried to help her do it. And this was the best way that I could think to help. I had taken so many. I used to skip school sometimes to go to the library to try to teach myself business. And I learned took a couple small business courses, and I thought that I could help her. And this is what came from it. And she wasn't happy at the time. Being from a military background, being an entrepreneur or having an entrepreneurial spirit is more looked at as being a very rebellious person. So,
Oh yeah.
So she wasn't too happy about it at first, but eventually she bought in. So.
But that's amazing. Okay, so now you present her with this business plan, and you guys now go grow this trucking company. Did you purchase the trucking company?
So we bought our own. So we had 22 of our own trucks. We bought 22 trucks eventually. We bought one at first, and then we grew to 22 in like less than 2 years. But that was kind of, so I'm 16 at the time. And this is kind of when I started getting into the digital space, where now I have all these trucks. I'm trying to figure out ways to basically optimize our operations. And I started finding out about websites and things of that nature. So I started getting kind of interested in tech. And there was actually a company that was coming out with a tech solution that would allow you to basically track how your trucks are performing on the roads, like where you're losing the most gas, how drivers are driving. And that's really originally what drew my interest to, I guess, technology, computers, online stuff. So I started playing around with that. And, a couple years later, I did go to college. I actually set out my first semester, then I ended up going to college. And when I get to college, I meet a guy by the name of Bobby Pham. He's like, hey, you're doing really good in trucking, but, it's not really a cash flowing business. A lot of it's very, it's not really, you don't have a lot of liquid cash in trucking, but, I can teach you how to do what I do in the technology space, specifically digital marketing. And at that time he was doing affiliate marketing, and the whole concept is you spend $1 to make $5 back. And so I'm like, oh, okay, I'm kind of interested, but whatever. So, a couple months go by, we're playing basketball, and he's like, I want to introduce you to one person. So he takes me to a guy named James' house, and James has a condo in New York, a high-rise condo in Raleigh, North Carolina. He has a Maserati, and he had another car, but I can't remember what it was. And James is only like 25. So it's like, okay, you have my interest. Now you have my attention. You have my curiosity at first. Now you have my attention. And James was just doing affiliate marketing. And that was back in the days where, affiliate marketing was more, I don't know if you remember, like, you put an email in for a free cruise trip and stuff like that. But that's pretty much what James was doing. He was the guy that was doing all that. So as I got in, I was like, a lot of this stuff is really shady, but if I could take this stuff and do it in a more legit way for corporations, I can make a killing from this. And so I decided that I was going to go to the NC State Entrepreneurship program. I built the website that was intended to help connect entrepreneurs, alumni, and business owners because I didn't feel like what I was learning in school was really relevant to what I needed to actually grow a successful business. And long story short, they ended up acquiring it from me about a year later, which was kind of funny. But I nearly got kicked out of college though because of how they. So because I was an athlete, I had ties to like the basketball and football team, and I was really cool with a lot of those guys
at North Carolina State.
And so one morning I get up like really early in the morning, and I'm launching this new website that I have, and I'm like, I just gotta do something to get people's eyes on it. So I got up at like 5 a.m. I paid a buddy of mine to get up with me. We went around to every stall on campus, and we put a sign that said, "I can see your business" in the men's bathroom stalls. And it had a guy with his eyes bulging out, looking down with his mouth wide open. Yeah, I thought it was cool. So then we had I went and bought like a bunch of t-shirts and a bunch of bags that had my company logo on them. And I gave them all to popular people I knew, people in class with me, and more importantly, the athletes of the school.
The influencers.
It seemed like the influencers. Right. So these were influencers before we really knew what influencers were.
Right.
So needless to say, I was in the dean's office by noon that day. And he was ready to kick me out of school because apparently this is before athletes could monetize on their own, so
way before
NCAA policy. So they were not happy about that at all. So
it wasn't the pictures of the guys with their eyes bulging say, "I can see your business." It was the monetization that they had a problem with.
They did not care at all. And the only reason I didn't get kicked out is because Jennifer Capps and Tom Miller came to my rescue. It's like, this guy's in our entrepreneurship program. We can actually use him and help him. And so the reason that they acquired the website is that, so all this happens, and you have a huge influx of traffic. I think like within a couple hours, I probably made at least $5,000-6,000 just from ads being on the platform, people clicking on the ads. So they nearly saved my life from getting kicked out of college. And I come in like a week later, and I'm really in a bum mood. And Jennifer's like, "What's wrong with you? Like, you realize you're still in college. Like, why are you upset?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't care." She was like, "Are you mad that you had to go around campus and take all the signs down?" I was like, "No, Jennifer, I don't really care about any of that. Google wouldn't pay me." I was like, I did all this work, and Google thought it was all spam because it all came from the same IP address, the same servers. They thought there was just a bunch of clickbait, and they didn't pay me for it. So I made $6,000 in a couple hours and didn't get paid any of it.
And you never got paid?
Google never paid me. But what ended up happening is that the alumni kind of were made aware of the incident, as it was called. I got put on the school newspaper, and then a lot of the alumni came and tried to hire me. And instead of trying to go work for one, I decided that I was going to work for all of them. I was just going to start a consulting firm, and that's how my digital marketing agency got built. Is I did that and started a digital marketing agency instead, by nearly getting kicked out of school that semester.
You were like Napster.
That's one way to say it. At least,
well,
at least I didn't go to jail for mine. So that's how I got into digital marketing. And at that time, I was probably 19, almost 20. And then from there, just kind of it grew really quickly. I mean, I dropped out of college by the end of my junior year. So yeah, I didn't even finish my senior year originally. I went back to school and got my degree, but I actually dropped out my junior year. We closed a big national campaign with a large insurance company. And I dropped out shortly after, which my mom, again, I showed her the contract. I thought she was going to be so happy, so excited. At that time, the base contract alone was like about $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just, as a college kid, you're like, "Oh, this is great." I went to show my mom that. She was so pissed. She was like, "Are you serious? You dropped out for this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but there's incentives and everything. Like, I can make a lot more money too. This is just the base." And she did not care at all. And so I promised her at that moment that I was still going to do it. I'm not going back to school right now, but I would go back to school. And I ended up going back to school in 2017 and graduating then. So from Colorado State University. So.
Man, I'm so glad I'm asking these questions, because these stories are fantastic. I'm picturing you as a college student. And by the way, I grew up in North Carolina. I was a decent athlete. My dream was to play college basketball. I wasn't gifted with height. I mean, I'm 5'11". So high school, that works out just fine. But to play, legit basketball, I wasn't that good. It wasn't going to work. But I wanted to play for Valvana. I wanted to go to North Carolina State and play for Jimmy V. So I'm picturing you hanging out with the basketball players, the football players, a guy that's probably playing pickup ball with some of these guys and hanging with them a little bit and getting some, credibility on the court. But then you're not like them at all when you go back to your dorm room. I mean, I'm curious how you were probably really confusing to those guys.
I was. And I think this is like, you're saying, you don't talk about yourself. Like, it took me years to even accept who I was, because I was good enough. I'm only 6'2", so for a D1 school, I'm not even tall enough to be a point guard, really.
Right.
And so, but I was good enough to play with them. It's just like, I had this, and I still had this little chip on my shoulder, I guess, where I didn't want to come off the bench. I didn't want to be a walk-on and not play at all. Even though I did technically walk onto the team, I didn't actually take or accept or anything like that. But for me, it was hard because you have athletes that, they're focused on basketball and girls. I'm not saying I don't like girls and basketball, but it was like, I would go home, like we would go out and party. I remember being, when I turned 21, we would go out and party till, 2, 3 in the morning. And then all my friends come back and they pass out. And I would stay up and I would work on my website. Like, I would do A/B testing and go through data and stuff. So it was really hard. It was kind of like I was living two lives. And like I've lived two lives for most of my life now, and I'm just now accepting that, hey, it's okay to be smart and to be cool at the same time. Now it's really tough for me.
I think that all changes as we get older. Also, you start meeting other people that, share maybe some of the passion for some of the things that the same passion that you have. And and who you are and your background, it does matter. I mean, your investors care about, the trajectory of the company, but they also care about the people that are running the company and being the face of the organization. So okay. So you go back and you graduate, or even before then, but you start this consulting company. Is that where you then started doing work with Microsoft and Zillow and some of these other companies, then eventually even supporting the DNC and Obama's campaign?
Not yet. So when I was doing the political stuff, so my company was more like regular local North Carolina companies. I did a lot of stuff in Texas, and then I guess the first campaign that I kind of blew up with was putting Renee Elmers. She was a Republican out of North Carolina into Congress for North Carolina. We had a big campaign that we did there that put her into Congress. And then a couple years later, the Obama and the DNC came. They actually had their event in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I put in a bid like, hey, I think we could do this. Let's put in the bid. I didn't realize that the incumbent shop and another group that we were going against both had over 150 employees each.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very tall order. But again, I think, I focused on data and how we were going to utilize data to help them in that campaign. And the one area, if you go back to Obama's campaign, you remember we talked about the hope and all that. But the thing that won Obama was his ability to attract the Latino demographic. And as we were building their website for the DNC, I realized and kind of finding silver lining through the analytics was that a lot of that demographic was consuming the information through their cell phones and their iPads. They weren't actually building stuff or looking at stuff on their computer. And now, having an app is kind of expected. Like, people, oh, they got an app, whatever. But back in 2012, like having an app and doing stuff that was geolocation based and even bilingual back then, it's kind of a very innovative, no one else had tried it before type thing. And that's really kind of the spark that, that struck the wildfire, I guess. And, the rest of that is history for Obama. And then what happened, even again, because I was more of a quiet behind the scenes guy, I kind of got pushed out where I didn't get to go up to DC and join his big campaign. I kind of stayed behind the scenes, and the guy that was running the campaign from North Carolina basically went and took all that credit, which is, it's okay. Now that I look back at it, I probably didn't want to do politics anyway. I don't really care, but
right.
The joke was, red or blue, all I saw was green at the time. But nonetheless, it showed me a lot in terms of understanding data. So nonetheless, we get acquired by a Republican group about a year later. They were the second largest Republican radio network. And in doing that, I meet some people from Marketo. And, I'm looking at, and actually I was working for Time Warner Cable at the time, and we were analyzing if we should stay with Marketo, Pardot, or there was actually another one called Exact Target, which is now, I think, tied into Pardot now as well.
And what for those who don't know, Marketo?
Those are marketing automation, email marketing platforms.
Okay.
They're like, if you run like email marketing campaigns, that's one of the platforms, the tools that you're utilizing to reach those consumers. And my ability, again, to look at data and kind of tie different aspects. So to run a really good marketing campaign, you really want to look at, how are users consuming information on my website? So if I come to, say I have a website that I have, a basketball, a football, and a baseball, and I'm selling those products. And a user comes in, they say, hey, I'm going to fill out a form for basketball. They fill out that form. And once that form is filled out, they're dropped into what's known as your CRM or your customer relation management system, which is basically a Marketo. And now you're able to nurture this customer, but you should be basically, if I'm interested in football, sending me stuff that's relevant to football, not baseball, right, basketball. And so my job, even though that sounds simple, is a lot more complicated, can get a lot more complicated than that. My job is basically to help companies understand how to tie this all together and really to attract value out of that. So in this process, we're going through the review, and the Marketo guys make the joke that, hey, you know this well enough, you should come work here. It's kind of like, whatever. And so a couple weeks later, my contract is getting ready to end. Like I'm getting ready to get out my clause from my buyout agreement. So, I really don't know what I want to do. I know I don't want to do politics anymore. I was doing the Democratic side or the Republican side. I went back to the Democratic side. Now I'm back on the Republican side again. It's like, I hate politics at this point. So they're like, come work for us. And I'm like, whatever. And so Helen Young, I'll never forget, it was a couple weeks before Christmas. And she said, I'm going to fly you out to California. We're going to do our interviews and I'm going to have you hired before Christmas. And this is like 2 weeks before Christmas. And needless to say, she did it. Uh, she flew me out to San Mateo, California, which is right outside of San Francisco. I went and met their team. And while I actually messed up that morning. So, my interview was the next day after I got there, but they never sent the actual notification for when I needed to come into the office. So I didn't want to risk it. I went all the way to California. The one thing I didn't want to do is to be late to the meeting or not show up for my interview. So I get up, I go to their office at 8 a.m. I wasn't even really sure when the office opened. I get to the office like 8 a.m. and people are actually there. So they let me in. And then about 9:30, actually about 9, Helen comes in. She's like, "Oh, you came here early." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Oh, your interview is in until 4:30. So I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And so, so she was like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Like, you don't have to go back to the hotel. We have an office here. You can just sit in this office and work from here." So she puts me in an office, and I had been interviewing with another team prior to that. They had a change in headcount and didn't hire me. So while I'm sitting there, the entire, the top executives from that team all are coming down, pulling me out of the room, pulling me up to their office to talk to me. So Helen is like, "Who are you? Like, what are you doing?" And I was like, I was already interviewing with them, so that's all that was. They weren't, and I actually got hired on the professional services side, but this was like value consulting team. And so I'm like, I was interviewing with them, and I got to the very end, but they couldn't hire me because they had a change in headcount. But they were all just saying hello. She's like, "Oh, okay." So then she says she's going to take me on a walk of a tour of the entire building. And as she's taking me on a tour, there's a guy that comes. He's like, "Hey, I know you. Good to see you again." And I had no idea who this guy was. So I'm like, "Okay, good to see you again, I guess." He was like, "You don't remember me?" And I was like, "No, not really. I really don't." It ended up, the guy was a CMO, or I think he was a CMO or the VP of marketing. He was a high up marketing guy at Marketo. And him and I had sat on a panel discussion at Ad Age in Denver right after I did the Obama stuff. And I had forgot all about the guy. And he
Oh, right on.
nice things
Yeah.
to say. So, yeah, so Helen was like, this is very interesting that all these people, and they're not just like regular people, these are like the top executives from different departments, are all coming to speak to me. And so they created a position just for me. Like the
Yeah,
position
she couldn't let you out of the building, man. At that point, she couldn't go home.
The position they probably originally wanted to hire me for wasn't really, it was more of a technical position. And they created a position called senior strategy consultant just for me, which is more like I got to deal with professional services, but I also got to jump into the sales side of it. So I really got to see, how do you build a true tech company like that from multiple angles. So that's really where I was doing the work with like the Zillow, the Microsoft, the Panasonics, and Xerox of the world. That was all at Marketo
Gotcha.
after Obama stuff.
Do you at this point in your career, you're what? You're not even 25 yet?
I might just be 25, turning 26. I was still a baby. I mean,
So at that age, not that far removed from hanging out with your buddies in college and playing pickup ball and putting posters on dorm room bathrooms or whatever, do you start to get like in your own fields, so to speak? Like, are you feeling like, man, compared to a lot of these other people I went to college with, I'm so on another plane when it comes to my professional life? Or are you so compartmentalized that you don't even think about things like that?
a little bit of both, being completely honest. I think it's a little bit of both. Like I think I have an ego a little bit, but it's so compartmentalized, no one knows who I am. Like even now, I think I'm doing decently in terms of creating waves in the mortgage space, but I only have like 700 Instagram followers. So it's not like I've really fixed the problem that much that well.
Is that really how you're judging that though? Come on.
I feel like that's how the kids my age judge it. Like but the reason I bring that up is that being around athletes. So a lot of the guys I know, they go on to go to like NBA, NFL, and stuff like that. Some of them go on to become professional like entertainers, like rappers and stuff like that. And so I moved to Miami after Marketo gets acquired for 1.4 billion from by Vista Equity Partners. And now I'm in Miami. I was going to go to Silicon Valley, but my mother was sick, so I wanted to be close to her, which is how I got to Florida. And you're around these guys and you meet these people and they're like, "Oh, well, my name is such and such. I have 30,000 followers or 80,000 followers on Instagram. No lie. That's
That's how
literally
they introduce themselves?
how they introduce themselves. So now it's like, well, I'm Brian. I don't
I've
really
got 300.
I got 300, you know, I guess that's good. But then like, so because of my background, I'm able to identify like the ones that are lying, the ones that have bought the followers. And there's usually the rule of 10%. Like, you know, if I have 80,000 followers, at least, you know, 1% should be engaged in terms of liking. And then out of the members that like, out of that 1% that like, about 10% will comment. So there's really a simple, it's again, it's all math, it's all data. So, you know, so I'm like, yeah, you have 80,000 followers, but you really bought like 70,000 of them or, you know, even more than that. So,
So you
but
can
yeah,
sort of backdoor their how proud they are on these numbers. You're the one they shouldn't be throwing these numbers out to, because you know the ones that are purchasing their followers.
I knew the ones that were purchasing their followers. You know, there was a time when I was younger, and to your original question was, you know, did I have an ego? And I don't. The ego is because of the circle of people I was around. Like I could backdoor into numbers. You know, being in the tech space at a young age, you're going to meet people that they call it white hat, black hat, and gray hat. White hat is for people that are by the books. Those are probably your corporate people that are doing marketing campaigns, stuff like that. Black hat are basically your scammers, people that are, you know, building campaigns really quickly, you know, getting a dollar, getting a lot of dollars and getting out. And gray hat is probably a mixture of both, where, you know, some of this stuff is stuff that, you know, someone that's completely by the books wouldn't know, but it's not illegal, but it's not necessarily best practices either. You know, there's workarounds that you can get stuff done. And so, you know, I'm going into the rooms with guys that, you know, they're completely black hat, but, you know, these guys, if I thought I had money, so now it's like, you know, so I don't fit with the athletes, but then I go to the tech guys and I mean the guys that have tons of money. I mean, these guys are going spending, you know, 10, 20 grand on a Friday night at the bar
Like
just
it's
to show off
nothing.
girls, like it's nothing.
Right.
So it's like I really don't fit in with them either. But you know, so I think that part was kind of where the ego was in check. It was like, you know, I wanted to have that ego, but everyone I was around was like, you know, athletes are athletes, you know, they're college athletes, so you know how that goes. And then these tech guys are just throwing out all kind of money, so you know how that goes. And so it's just like, you know, I really still don't belong anywhere just yet. So
That's interesting. You know, I wanted to ask that question. Look, I have two relatively young boys, although they're not that young anymore. I mean, one's 21, so he's closer in age to you than I am to you. The other one's 18, and they live their life on Snapchat and Instagram, and they're super responsible. At least I think they are, with what they're doing on their phone. But I know that they are influenced by perception.
yep.
They don't really know what the reality is of what it is they're looking at. So it's interesting to hear you, somebody that's lived in that space and maybe has grander ideas of what you're going to do growing businesses and in your own career, versus only sort of keeping statistics on how many followers do I have, or how many likes am I ultimately getting. It's conversation for another day, but boy, I'd love to also pick your brain on the psychology impact of that type of activity, right? And that type of ultimately thinking. I mean, you're even talking about your own psychology, that you don't feel like you come to the game with a big ego, but the reality is you must have some ego. If you don't have any, then I don't, you know, you're clearly a motivated guy, and you're probably motivated by success. There's some ego at some level with that, but it can be too much, right? And it can send you into some black hat kind of worlds if you're not careful.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And I think, you know, I do have an ego. I think I do a lot better job of controlling it these days. And it's a lot better tempered than when I was this young 22, 23-year-old kid. It's a lot better now. And I think my ego now is more so the confidence in knowing that I am doing something that is great for the industry, that can be adopted by multiple lenders and can really make an impact there. I think where I've lost ego, or at least where I've learned to kind of better control the ego, is when it actually comes to my employees and my staff, you know, making a work environment that people want to work in. I think it's really tough when I'm the type of guy that gets in the trenches with you. You know, I can tell you from a high level strategy what you need to do, but I can also get down there in the trenches and actually do it on my own. And that's kind of the hardest person to be, because, you know, when people are underperforming or what you perceive as underperformance, you know, it makes it harder to kind of hold back when you're disciplining or even coaching. And I've really had to learn to coach more than discipline. And I think that's where the ego has changed over the years as I've gotten older and really understood, how to manage a high performance and high growth team more than anything.
As a guy with really a tech brain, when you kind of layer that on top of what you were just talking about, which is leadership and management and mentorship, was it hard for you? I mean, for a guy that can get down there and just do the job, if you're not doing your job, then get out of my way, I'll just do it. But you had to know, or did you have to learn that that's not scalable? And so you have to tweak your management style to be able to scale a business versus doing so much of it yourself that you ultimately can't scale.
I had to learn. And I think when I say I lost the ego, the first part of ego is putting your pride to the side and saying, hey, I don't know the answer to this. I need your help. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that. A lot of people say, oh, this is how it's always worked. And honestly, if we're being honest with ourselves, if that's how it's always worked, then it's probably outdated already. Mm-hmm. But that was the biggest thing, is that even when I came into the mortgage space, like, I knew I was really good at building digital strategies and stuff like that, but I'm still learning every day. And I'm not afraid to say, like, hey, I don't know how to answer this. And sometimes I know the answer. It's just I don't know how to answer the question properly for someone that has 30, 40 years of mortgage experience. But I can tell you from a psychological perspective, like you said, like, I've done the work to understand how low to moderate income borrowers go about making decisions, how minorities go about making decisions, but more importantly, how millennials in Generation Z, people just in general, go about making their buying decisions. And we have to think about, if we really want these individuals to continue buying homes, years from now, we have to build products that are more personalized and more relevant to how they go about making their buying decision. You can't just say that, oh, this is how we've always done it, you guys need to do it this way as well. You have to really create products that give consideration to those changes that have come, over the last couple of years, really.
For sure. And you're also entering into an industry that has a relatively old average age when you look across the entire, that's changing. It's actually changing pretty quickly over the last couple of years. I'm excited about that. Let's talk about Home Lending Pal. How does that happen? You're sitting on top of the world as far as I'm concerned, and you could probably do lots of things. We were joking around in a call that you and I had a few weeks back where I said, why don't you just go work for McKinsey and travel the world and get a humongous check and probably do that job with 1.5 arms tied behind your back? How did this happen?
So Marketo gets acquired. I go to Miami. I start working for a private equity firm called ESW Capital out of Austin, Texas. Actually, they were in the same building as Vista Equity Partners, and they were trying to do the same type of approach, which is basically they take consultants, they buy companies, and those consultants basically manage and run those companies for them. And there's a guy, Andy Triba, out of Austin that really teaches me about time management and execution. Kind of saying that, he would only give me 40 hours a week. And there was a system that he had in place that after 40 hours, you couldn't actually log into the system. So I learned that, no matter who you are, if you're really effective with your time management, you get everything you need to do done within 40 hours a week. And so, this is kind of starting that process. So now, to your point, I am this consultant. I'm doing all my work. I'm only working 40 hours a week. They're the most stressful 40 hours a week I've ever worked. But, I can work those 40 hours from Dubai, which I actually did. And I was going to Dubai, Colombia, like I'm traveling all over the world just doing consulting stuff. And I would come back home and a lot of my friends would be like, yo, I'm just trying to do what you're doing. And after you hear that so many times, you realize that you're the only one that's really done anything to improve their life. Like everyone else is kind of, I won't say stuck where they were, but they're not scaling as quickly as I was. Mm-hmm. It kind of made me feel bad. I'm in Miami. I have a condo on the water. I have, multiple cars, and I'm not talking about regular cars. Like I was to the point where I was ashamed to say, like, I had, a drag racing team. I had an R8, a Maserati. Like I actually have like really nice cars.
Was that one of your cars sitting out in front of Terranea when I saw you last in California at that last event?
It should be, not yet, but it will be. It was a Ferrari 488, and I definitely want that one in white. But I'm a really
do you see that green mirrored Lambo that was sitting out there for a couple of days?
Like I'm really into cars, and I love cars more so for myself. Like, I get in again. I like getting my hands dirty. I would change out the exhaust. I would, change headers. I don't do it as much now, but when I was younger, I really loved being, I just love tinkering with stuff. And so,
Hmm.
and you would think that again, a guy like that should have an ego, but I was so conflicted that I would have all these things and I wouldn't tell anybody I had them. you know, and then one day, I meet Steven, my co-founder, and I realized that, he was on the opposite side of the mortgage crisis, the subprime mortgage crisis. I had bought my mom her dream home, uh, way too big for what she needed at the time. We nearly lost it. She was a veteran. We weren't even in a VA loan. So, we were sold the wrong product anyway. I think we were sold an arm because the interest rate shifted after a couple of years. But nonetheless, it really made me say like, hey, you've done well financially. You understand, credit. And I learned credit from a Jewish guy from when I started the marketing company. My business partner was Jewish, so I got the chance to be around his father and his grandfather a lot, and they really taught me about credit and ways to utilize credit. And so I woke up one morning and said, hey, I'm happy, but I'm not making an impact. I'm not doing anything differently. And there's a way to make money, but also make a difference. And Home Lending Pal is really born out of that. So, I called Steven back. I was like, hey, let's do this. And I'd already spent like $40,000 trying to drive lead generation for like, 2 months. So, nonetheless, me and Steven meet up and we say like, what is the true problem? And it's really that, you have lenders that want to give a product out and you have a audience, millennials and minorities just don't understand how home ownership works. But yet there's this fear of, I don't want to, when you think about it now, like if I wanted to understand if I could buy a home, I have two options. I can either go online to a website that is very generic and broad that doesn't have information that's really relevant to me. And if I want to get more personalized stuff, I'm like, okay, well, I need something that's more relevant to me. I have to go to a lender. But then that lender has to actually say, okay, well, the only way I can find out if you're qualified or not is to run an application for you. So submit an application. So now you're asking someone that knows you're not qualified to submit an application to tell them that they're not qualified again.
Right.
And you would think that for most people, you would think that that would create a psychological thing that, okay, now I know what I need to address. It's okay. But for a large portion of that segment, or especially within the minority segment, what it does is it creates this psychological barrier that I am not qualified now. These are so big of items that I need to address that I will never be qualified. I don't know if I will ever be able to pay off my student loans. And in their mind, it's not that I have to pay off just a portion of my student loans. It automatically goes for them that I need to pay off all of my student loan debt. So those were the things that, when I created Home Lending Pal, it was a marketplace for lenders that wanted to give information, but also like a interactive personalization app that would allow you to upload your information and get answers. And then once you're ready, it would start the process of gathering documents and connecting you to lenders that would be willing to work with you, but also setting the expectation of, what you would be likely to be approved for, who would be likely to work with you, what's the best loan product, and really giving information to consumers that historically have not had that information was really the goal there.
It sounds like you are excited about the part of this that feels like an educational tool.
Yes, I'm most excited about that. I think education is really the key for it all. I think, well, I don't think I know. Right now, there's 21 million mortgage-ready millennials that are not going through the process. About 16% of them are African American. So there's a lot of segments. So I don't want to make it sound like we're just for our actual database is only about 30% African American.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the media, everything else talks about African American because I am Black, my co-founder is Latino. But this is really a generational problem where you have all these buyers that are qualified. And keep in mind, there's only 122 million Americans in the United States. So 21 is a very large segment.
Right.
And they're not going through the process. So I'm more excited about showing people that believe that I can never obtain home ownership. I can never create wealth for myself and family, that it is possible. Yes, you have to take steps to get there, but it is possible. And to your point, if you can add this interactive, so think of it like you're bringing Siri, where you have voice and text-based interaction that happens in the background of your phone. But then you're also creating a personalized experience such as a Spotify, where now based on your behavioral interaction with the website and homes you're looking at, you're now able to personalize the experience much more for that consumer. But then you add on a third element, which is like a Duolingo, a gamification, where as I upload documents, as I validate tax statements, etc., I am now earning credits towards my closing costs by doing so. But as a consumer, instead of getting the search, I can now see that I am making progress towards my overall end goal. And every time I log in, I may not log in every day, but when I log in once a month or twice a month, and 36% of our people log in twice a month or more, I'm able to see that I am making progress towards my overall goal, but I'm also getting personalized information on what I need to focus on next. And, it's a very, very tall task, but I think if I can execute that, not if I, if we as Home Lending Pal can execute that, I think we will open the door for 21 million Americans that, are qualified but not going through the process.
Yeah, well, it feels like it's not if, it's just when. I mean, it takes time, it takes money, right? And scale. And I'm curious if so someone who maybe has Zillow on their phone, right? And there are tools within, and I don't need to use them. I mean, there's other apps that you can do the same thing. But they're connected differently to real estate or to mortgage. And maybe it's embedded inside of a a financial services company's, app or platform where I can go in and play around with, how much, what are my assets? What's my debt? What's my current income? And it give me an idea of ultimately what I can afford. But I think what you're saying is what that leaves out is the actual education around why those numbers are applicable, and also a process by which to get to another place, or be able to get plugged into a product that maybe doesn't ding me on the rate side as much as another product might. Is that fair? Is that
is absolutely fair. And I think it even goes a layer deeper. If you look at, I don't know if you ever watch HGTV, and I feel like I've been watching that show or those channels a lot more these days. But in particular, there's a show called House Hunters. And
okay?
My girlfriend wanted to watch House Hunters one day, and so I watched with her. And I realized there's also a social component of buying a home as well. On that particular show, they picked three homes, and really three homes are at three different tiers. You have the home that is basically ready for move in now, which is the very top of their budget. You have the middle home, which is probably the home they should choose, but it doesn't really have everything they want. And they have the fixer upper. And so really what I wanted to do with the data, and all the data is available online, really what I wanted to do is be able to allow them to save those three homes and then see from a financial perspective, outside of just the monthly mortgage, what else financially do you have to take into consideration if you were to buy that house? So taxes, if I'm renovating that home, their expected renovation costs of renovating that home, and really allow the consumer to get a better understanding of the apples to apples comparison of that particular home. But then you have another layer, where you have the typical, should I live in the city versus suburbs type question? So allowing also to bring in data to give you a better understanding of as you're traveling from one location to the next, what are the costs for that? What is the maintenance cost for your car? And so to your point, we have a long way to get there, but if you're able to really give that apples to apples comparison, and then that social element of being able to then share this with your mother, your father, your brother, your significant other, and they can weigh in. Okay, well, if it was me, I would do this. Like, this one's stretching your budget a little bit, but you could take their advice and cut back on your entertainment expense and be okay. Like, I think that's really the ultimate vision of what I want Home Lending Pal to be. And I don't necessarily, I would love for you to download our app, but if we have to white label it so that others or work with companies like FinLocker, where we can figure out a way to integrate into what they're doing to allow the users to consume it from the lender's portal, or we are partnered with one of the nationwide, I won't say the name, but we are partnered with one of the nationwide companies that does that has that website like Zillow. And even if you want to go on there and it's just an embedded experience that you can then funnel it into what we're doing, that would be great. But I think it's really meeting the consumer where they feel the most comfortable at, and giving them as much information as possible to make an educated decision is really the goal. So
whether it's now or in the future, does that also bolt on to my ability as a user of the app or the technology tool to be able to see how that relates to my overall wealth growth and goal? Like it bolts onto my future retirement?
I think it does. I think it has to. I would love to, eventually, again, dive deeper into lenders LOS and LOS systems, and even going further into the secondary market where you can then see the value of how your home grows. If I were to make an investment in property, how that looks. And it's not just helping the consumer, it's also helping the lender with the data, making sure that everyone's on the same page for that. Now lenders have a better opportunity to determine, which loans are going to be profitable for us. We might be passing on loans that are truly profitable for us just because we have newer or less experienced loan officers that just don't know. They haven't been educated about all of our products yet, so they're only selling what they know. And it's a typical, again, going back to the psychology of it, it's a typical human element where I go towards people and I go towards products that I'm familiar with. If I have studied FHA loans and FHA loans is what I know, every time I get a customer, I'm going to try to sell an FHA loan because I haven't learned anything else. And so, I don't think AI is good. I don't think AI is bad. I think AI learns based on the people that build it. So if you can get a bunch of people from all different types of background, and our team is very diverse. We have people from all different types of backgrounds, and you can have them input and influence the way that artificial intelligence is built. I do think you can have a product that, again, is more focused on education and ensuring that the consumer and the lender are both protected in this transaction while also reducing friction and increasing success.
That's great. We were talking about education, maybe your passion for that. Are you finding that that's the thing you get most excited about is maybe seeing that there's a light bulb that can go off in a consumer's brain that maybe didn't go off before?
Yeah, I mean, we've done it 800 times, which is really not a big number. I mean, can we scale that is really the question. We've had a couple of international groups that we've opened up our database to allow them to come validate the numbers. Because I think, there's often this concern or this consensus that, are these numbers too good to be true? And I don't think our numbers are too good to be true right now. And we're really helping one out of 3 of our users goes on to become a homeowner. So I think that's really good. So I don't think it's no longer, are these numbers true? The question now is, how quickly can we scale these numbers? And can we get the resources to scale these numbers quickly to really maintain our first mover advantage within the market? I think those are really the answers right now. If you're asking me kind of in the mind of a tech guy, what I'm looking at, those are the questions that I'm trying to answer. While also, we are venture backed, we are a for-profit company, so how do you balance the capitalist solution while also making a social change is, the way that I have to look at it. And it's a very fine balancing line. Consumers are very finicky about stuff. So, it's hard.
Yeah, no, I hear you. My brain goes in so many directions. I've had a chance to talk to a lot of really influential people, some that, come from the business side and the tech side of the world, and others like, you were mentioning FinLocker. And so Bryan Young, who obviously is the president and one of the partners at that company, introduced me to a guy named Kali Sweeney. And Kali started I don't know if you know Kali, but he started a nonprofit, the Downtown Boxing Gym in Detroit. And, Kali's a guy that couldn't read or write when he was 20 years old or whatever. He had issues with homelessness and the law. But he identified a gap and he filled it. I mean, that's what he did. Right. And so now this has turned into, getting kids off the street with boxing, but using boxing as a conduit to put them in front of the books. And then before you know it, they've got this huge downtown boxing gym. And the majority of what they do is not boxing. They're filling a gap that the public school system, had created. And I'm blown away by it. But I also see people like you and Bryan and other leaders that serve on boards like that use maybe something they did on the capitalism side, the business side, the for-profit side, and then use some of that to educate a group of people that may not get that education otherwise, which then leads me, and I don't want to keep you that much longer, but it leads me to something that it sounds like you're comfortable enough to kind of talk about it, but not super comfortable enough to go really deep. And that is the fact that you are a minority and that a lot of folks on the outside see this as being a minority-based tool. And clearly I don't really see it that way. Now, maybe I'm the idiot. I don't see it that way. I see it as black, white, green, red, yellow, whatever. If you grew up in an environment where for whatever reason, you didn't have access to those educational tools to put you in a position to generate wealth or know how to generate wealth, well, then that's a segment that seems like it should be served. And it does seem like you have regardless of the color of your skin, Bryan, it seems like you do have a passion for that as well.
Yeah, that is actually where the original passion was. I think, in the last year we've had, George Floyd and other stuff. And I believe in humans. I think there's Black people that are good, there's white people that are good, there's Black people that are bad, white people that are bad, etc. It is what it is. It's the world.
Mm-hmm.
But my passion is really for helping humans, helping everyone do good for themselves and try to create wealth for their families. Coming from a background where I saw my mother struggle, before going to the military, experiencing what it was like to really not have enough to eat that night. I know what that feels like, and I think the ability, and I told Bryan this in our interview, that my ability to relate to that and to understand that allows me to build solutions in a different way that also accommodate for that. But even when I say that, like I still need people like yourself, people like Bryan, that have the experience from the mortgage side, or even just from life side, that you may not experience that. You may not know what that feels like, but you do know what it takes to put someone in the home successfully. So how can I merge your experience with my experience and my knowledge of technology to make that where it's better for everyone? Is really my ultimate goal. And I think to do so, again, it's business. So, it's competitive, but at the same time, you can collaborate and all the companies still do well. And the ecosystem is much better because of that, if done appropriately.
Yeah, for a young guy, you got kind of an old soul mentality when it comes to things like that. That's a great way to kind of start to close this out. I do have a couple questions for you though. Are you still running games? You still playing ball?
Man, I have not touched the basketball. Well, my nephew plays now, so I'm starting to pick it back up a little bit, but I haven't really played in a game since before COVID. Bad things come in three. Like 3 of my closest friends all tore their Achilles here recently. So I have this dying period. It feels like talking about it right now. My Achilles are starting to hurt, but I feel like I'm going to tear my Achilles. So I do not play basketball anymore. At least hopefully it stays like that.
Were those guys playing like in a local city league or a church league or something like that?
Well, a lot of my friends, they still play in city leagues. A lot of them play in like semi-pro leagues or your summer pro-ams as well. I used to play in a lot of summer pro-ams, and that's a different level. So I'm probably not good to play in summer pro-ams anymore. But yeah, a lot of city leagues where they're more, you have your different tiers, which is like usually play the most competitive ones. And I don't think you ever lose the love of the game. Like I still love it. I still wish I could get out there, but I know one, my body doesn't allow it, and two, I don't think my schedule and time doesn't really allow for me to play as much as I want to anymore.
No, I hear you. I'm pushing 50 at this point, and let me tell you, I haven't played basketball in a long time, but I still have dreams that are as real as they can be. And I wake up and I think, I'm still a gym rat, but it's a different kind of gym now. Now it's my garage gym where I'm just trying to stay as healthy as I can. But I think I think I can go run. Let me tell you, I'm right there with you. I'll be blowing out the Achilles or popping an ACL or something like that.
I got to figure out something to do physically, but I'll still walk through the house acting like I'm crossing somebody over, all the trash can. Like I'm still a kid at heart. I still do all that, but I'm probably hanging up the shoes here. I do want to get into, as COVID hopefully goes away, maybe have a company team in a local league just to build camaraderie with the team for those that want to play. But I'm done past the competitive stage of my life, at least for now.
You say that until you get back on the court again, and then those competitive juices just start flowing. You're going to say, I'm just going to stand outside the 3-point line. I'm not driving to the lane because I don't want to blow an Achilles. And then Bryan's going to call me up and say, Levin, you're not going to believe this. I blew out that Achilles.
A kid was talking trash, and I had to show him that, it's funny now because I'm in Florida, so nobody really knows who I am now, which is good. But, when I was in North Carolina, people knew I used to play. So you often get like, I thought you were good, man. Like I heard so many stories about you growing up, and now you're just like this guy. So it's like, no, I can still do that. Watch it.
That's right.
Now I have less to prove now, and hopefully it stays that way. Even if I do get back on the court, hopefully I don't feel like I need to prove anything. But like you said, I'm a very competitive person. So, we'll see.
Well, if you and I are ever in the same spot and there's a court somewhere close by, I'm not going to play you one-on-one, but we can play horse, so we can shoot around a little bit.
And we can play horse. We can shoot around, shoot threes. So you can make the most out of 10. But I probably won't play in the game anymore.
and maybe solve some problems along the way. I still find that those environments are sometimes where you get your best ideas and your best inspiration is when you're just out there doing something quiet by yourself or with someone that you trust. And you come up with these ideas that lead to maybe things like Home Lending Pal. But Bryan, man, it was a blast. I knew I'd have fun talking to you. I was looking forward to this, and I'm excited to watch you guys grow and expand. I'd love to have you back on at some point and take 2 or 3 of these topics and just dive deeper into those topics. But I'm rooting for you guys. You guys are already crushing it. You've had a heck of a life up until this point, and a long way to go. So I'm excited to watch you continue to roll.
Thank you, Eric. And you made a friend. So whenever you have me back, just give me a call, shoot me a text or an email, and I'll be there.
Hey, that is a deal. Well, thanks for coming on the Walk podcast, Bryan, and we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Thanks, brother. Have a good one.
All right, bud.